Hello, everyone. Welcome to another On This Day in Canadian Military History live stream. This one is one that I've been looking for a while. Me and today's guest have been planning this one, I think, for I don't even know how long. So we've been waiting for this one and really excited about it. So today's guest is Rich Fisher. We're going to be talking about what he's known for and the association that he works with the Vickers machine gun. But we're also going to be talking about a book that the association has put out about CANLOAN Officer, and we'll get into those details. So we'll talk about the book and how that came up, and the CANLOAN program as well, which isn't very well known even in Canada. So it'll be a good one to kind of get some background on that. But first, we're going to start off with the some people will think not so fun, but I do, the good technical details of the Vickers, and we've got a real expert here today. So we're really lucky to have this. So another one I'm really excited for. Hey, Rich, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
No problems, Brad. I'm good, thank you.
Good. That's great to hear. So we've been talking, like I said, we've been talking for I don't even know how long, since well before Christmas, I think, about this. So I'm trying to get this one planned and all fit together. So really excited because you have a wealth of knowledge. As I keep learning and prepping for this one, I'm learning more and more about everything that you know and what you do and all that, and it's great stuff. And as we'll get to it, we can see lots behind you. So we'll probably get into that shortly. But to begin, for those that might not know or know you or about the association, just how did you become interested in this one particular piece of military equipment?
So quite simply, my grandfather was a Vickers machine gunner in the Second World War, which is a nice simple, it's a simple way of explaining it. He was a member of the Cheshire Regiment. So that's the short answer. I'll now go into the long answer, which was I got given some Vickers machine, some family military history medals and bits and pieces when I was about 8 or 9 years old. We were clearing some family houses, and I got given those, and that sort of got me interested in military stuff quite nicely. Then it was the 50th anniversary of D-Day, so I know exactly, it's quite easy. I know exactly when that was. Yeah. And I got taken to the Royal Marines Museum down in Portsmouth. And my grandfather, my pa, he sat down behind a Vickers machine gun and took it apart. 50 years on. So he was in Italy, in Anzio, and then he transferred to the King's Shropshire Light Infantry. And we don't think he was in their machine gun platoon. They did have a machine gun platoon. They shouldn't have done, but they did. So we don't think that he. There's another sort of rabbit hole to get down there. But we don't think he did. So it's 50 years, almost to the day, that he touched a Vickers machine gun. He took it apart in front of us. I was like 12-year-old, mesmerized by what he'd just done. I think I was 11. Sorry, I was 11. Came back, and by my 12th birthday, a few months later, I'd had the opportunity and taken that opportunity to buy a deactivated Vickers machine gun. Wow. So at 12 years old, I started on the slippery slope of weapons collecting, to the point that now I'm sat in a shed of, like, I think we've got 25 Vickers machine guns sat in here, plus loads of other stuff as well. So slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be how it goes to a lot of people I talk to. It's just these things pile up, and all of a sudden that's what you're doing. I mean, my story's a little different. It wasn't necessarily the equipment of it all. Mine was the book journey, as I'm sure you can tell from behind me, because that was what my grandfather was into. He was a vet himself. I didn't serve overseas or anything, but Canadian vet, and he just, every time we would go visit, he was reading a new book. Like, he would read like crazy. So I guess it's funny how these things influence, right? So when we sit and think about it, it's our people come before us have a lot of impact on us in these things. But anyway, so I was looking at the book that I was mentioning that you guys have put together, and we'll talk about that more towards the end. But when I was telling you is I'm not the most well-versed person in the technical stuff. I'm trying to get better and learning all the time. But I went to the part of the book where the author is talking about his experiences and basically wrote his own kind of technical manual about the Vickers and everything. And I was wondering if you could just kind of give us a basic overview, because I got a little confused. It's a far more complicated gun than I thought it was, about how this thing works and what it was designed to do, and any of those good details that you can give us.
Well, so simply, my normal sort of spiel will talk about the Vickers start service in 1912, and at the time it's the only automatic weapon other than the Maxim. So the machine gun, like the Vickers, is the only automatic weapon that the British Army has, and no other armies around the world have it as well. So it's a water-cooled machine gun. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna do what we said, and I'm gonna just take this off the stand here, because those that come and visit will know that we do like displays, and I will just, because I can point then quite easily to a Vickers machine gun, and that always helps, doesn't it? So
you see that from the video,
yeah. So this is one of the Vickers that we have in the collection. This is a 1918 made gun, and it's a skeletonized gun, so you can see it all working, which is quite good. And hopefully, if you haven't seen it already, we actually had this firing not long ago. So like that sort of blows people's mind. It nearly, we were worried it was going to literally blow our minds. We checked everything first. So we had this firing, a couple of rounds through it, so you could see everything working. But this is a water jacket. So this is like the unique element of the Vickers, in that it allows it to do really good sustained fire. And it's because of, so you fill this with 7.5 pints of water, and it boils up after about 1,000 rounds, and you lose about 1.5 pints of water for every 1,000 rounds that you're firing then. And you think, well, okay, so 1,000, how long does that take to fire? And that could be as little as 4 minutes. Because it's not a particularly fast rate of fire gun. So the MP42, things like that, really high technical rate of fire. But the practical rate of fire across all of these machine guns is the same. So it's always 125 rounds a minute as the normal rate, and then the rapid rate, or the emergency rate, or whatever it gets called, is about 250 rounds a minute. Now, the difference between this gun and light machine guns or air-cooled guns, so water-cooled and then air-cooled, is that this can keep doing that for as long as you keep filling it up with water. So you have to fill it up manually, through here. You fill up the water, and then ammunition belts. So this is a 25 round example, but they normally come in 250 round belts. This is a training belt, so that would fill in, go into the feed block, and effectively you keep loading that with water and ammunition, and it will keep firing. It's tripod mounted, so it's got a really good base of fire, so that it doesn't wobble, it doesn't move about. It wobbles a bit because that's the point.
Right.
Why would you put 250 rounds a minute into exactly the same place? You wouldn't. So you want it to be a little bit wobbly, and the recoil causes it to move, and obviously changes in the barrel and everything will create what's called a beaten zone. So that's like an ellipse. That's like this kind of shape. And that changes, the size of that and the shape of it changes depending on how far away you're firing, because bullets do different things in the air, and aerodynamic stuff, which is like beyond my technical knowledge. But they change shape. So basically with the Vickers, you can fire out to 4,500 yards. So that is 3 miles. That's quite an impressive kind of distance. And at that space, you have a beaten zone that's about 120 yards wide and about 40 yards deep. So it's quite an area to cover. So one of the key things that I talk about when I talk about the Vickers is that one gun on its own is pretty useless, because if anything happens to that gun, it breaks and you stop firing.
Right.
But beyond that basic mechanical issue, over that area, 120 yards by 40, if you're putting 250 rounds down every 2 minutes, every 4 minutes, if it's a barrage, you start to slow the rate of fire down because you don't want it boiling up, you don't want to waste water, but you need to use more than one gun together, because otherwise you won't saturate that area. So 95% of the shot will fall within that beaten zone, but what you want is more and more guns firing over the same area, so that you start to collect as much impact in that area as possible. So it's like, when artillery, you don't get artillery guns firing on their own. They all hit the same target to have better effect. And it's the same with machine guns. And, from 1917 onwards, so the Vickers in service from 1912, Machine Gun Corps formed in 1915. Before that, they've really been used as a section in the infantry battalions, so as part of the headquarters. They start to brigade them together, And by 1917, and it's the Canadian machine gun corps that really revolutionized some of this stuff. So, they at Vimy, they're putting 300, I think it's 354 Vickers machine guns working in the same fire plan.
Something like that. Yeah.
5 million rounds.
It's a lot.
Stockpiled. It's some big numbers.
It's a lot.
But so you've got massive saturation, and pretty much from that date, the guns aren't really used as we perhaps think they're used. Nobody stood behind them mowing people down. I mean, they do get used for that, definitely. But that's not their intended purpose in a way. Mm-hmm. They become that's how they're used in defence a lot, but in the attack and in planned operations, this indirect fire, the creation of these beaten zones. To culminating in 1917 with Vimy, and then in the Second World War, culminating in the pepper pot attacks, where you've got Vickers, mortars, 25-pounders, 40 mil, Sherman's firing indirect, loads of stuff. All
basically whatever you have on hand is the pepper pot. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That whole sort of divisional level firepower.
Yeah.
Whereas you're either firing over the head of the infantry, or you're one of the infantry, or you're supplying the guys firing over the head. If you're not in one of those roles in a div by early 45, then really you're sort of not adding value too much to what they're doing. So it's a really interesting combination. So that's how the Vickers, in a way, survives, actually, because it's got this weapon that's designed in 1908,
right?
Still serving through all of that mechanization period in the 30s. So towards the end of the 30s, we tried to replace it with a BISA, not just in tanks, but in the infantry as well. But it can't do the water cooled thing. It can't do the sustained fire. So we try and replace it, and it doesn't work. So we go, well, tanks can have BISAs. That's fine, because they don't do sustained fire that much. So we make some more at Vickers. And then in 1948, we try and replace it again, and nothing can match it. So what happens? The Vickers eventually gets replaced by the L7 FN Mag, general purpose machine gun, M240, whatever it gets called around the world. It gets replaced by that. But that's not because that's better than what this does. It's because we sit down and go, the army of the time, and go, we no longer need sustained fire in the same way. So GPMG can do SF, stuff, that's fine, but they don't need to do it for hours. They don't need to keep it water cooled. So that's why the Vickers gets replaced. The two serve alongside each other for a while, but principally the Vickers outlasts the thing for which it was designed, which is quite quite something.
That's also very rare. That doesn't happen in military technology, right? It's usually the opposite, right? It's still being used when it's been surpassed. I think that's a really interesting idea and way of thinking.
There's no water cooled guns there. There's no water cooled machine guns now around the world. They don't exist.
No,
so
So sorry, this is that's why when we were talking about why I like the live streams, we get lots of great questions and interactions. This leads to something I wanted to ask about. And we have a question from Scott, who's a big supporter of the channel, talking about the use of the Vickers, about the Canadian Mortar Machine Gun Brigade in the First World War.
Just going to sit down.
Yeah, because
I can.
If you want to speak about that, and then I have a question related to this after your explanation would be great.
Yeah, so the MMG brigades are really interesting because they're proper mechanized. There's no there's nothing actually that competes with them. So at the start of the war, we've got some armored cars running around, I don't know, really doing policing duties actually in 1914, 1915. And most of those are coming from either the Royal Naval Air Service or the Royal Naval Armoured Car Division. To go out, their intention is to almost search and rescue, to go out quickly, pick up down pilots, come back. And then we have them bombing around the desert a bit. But in the true sort of mechanization of machine guns, that's where the motor machine gun brigades come in. And they create a mobile firepower force that starts off with Colts, actually. So the Canadians at the start of the Great War have Colt machine guns, Colt potato diggers of either 1895 or 1914, which are the weirdest machine guns ever.
They are.
Yeah, they're just crazy.
Yeah.
Hopefully got a paper coming out next year on how they were actually really problematic
Yeah. Oh, they were.
for logistics, because the only place making them was Canada, or the US buying them into
US
Canada.
for Canada, yeah.
And then they had to be shipped across. So originally, MMG brigades start with those, but the MMG brigades sort of provide a core level asset. So Canadian core level asset in a similar way to the motor machine guns. So the machine gun corps, when it's formed, has 3 branches, and it eventually has a 4th, which is the heavy branch, the tanks. But you have the infantry, the cavalry, and the motors. And the MMG brigades are separate to that to start with, and you've got 2, first and second, and they come online, let's say, core level, and they start to provide this strange kind of firepower that is really, I don't know, it's really interesting in that they were doing direct fire. They were using the trucks, so they had autocars, Canadian autocars, which are you've got one in the museum in Ottawa. It's an amazing piece of kit. It's one of those that I look at and go, we could make one of them, because it's really simple. When you get bored.
Sorry, just to jump in. I mean, I go because before they've been shut down because of COVID for the last month or so, and I go there frequently, as one would expect. And I sometimes just go and look at that because, like you're right, it's simple in its construction because that's what was available, but it's just so interesting for the time period as well. I mean, I'm just fascinated by that thing, and I've looked at it from all different kinds of angles and trying to understand it and doing some digging. It's just, to me, it's an utterly fascinating piece of equipment that just doesn't seem to have kind of, I don't know, not necessarily the respect, but maybe the understanding that probably deserves.
No, because I don't think that really gets matched until you get the likes of the gun buses and stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to say in South Africa in 1980s, where they had like 4 Vickers put on the side, and but actually you got like long range desert group and stuff like that. But firing machine guns from the vehicle is something that the universal carrier can do later on, but it isn't designed to do.
No,
this is really designed to do that.
Not at all.
So the MMG brigades get used to supplement basically gun numbers. So in that 354 at Vimy, they're in there. They're great. What I will just do, because it just rings a bell a minute.
Yeah. Take your time.
Because I've got it on hand. So if you've looked closely, that is the attachment that the guns go onto. Now that is the top of the little tripod,
right.
that is used, the auxiliary tripod. So every Vickers had one of these. Now I've looked at the photos in France, and of the autocars, and particularly there's those postcards or the German propaganda photos, press photos of the guys that are killed. They don't have those attachments, so I don't know if that autocar that's in the museum, where that sits in the lineage of autocars. But it uses these to attach the guns around the outside, and then in the centre you've got the 2 much more fixed mountings that you could fire, perhaps fixed line. Overhead fire from, because you can't do it from these, they wobble too much.
They do.
We've got a vid of us firing from these, and it's sort of stable, but you wouldn't trust it for very long.
No. No.
So the MMG brigades are really interesting. Bruttenau, in terms of what he does with the machine gun corps and that development of machine gun tactics, and then using them not just in that overhead fire. I think, I talk about Vimy being the peak of Great War usage there.
Right.
But I would argue that the Canadian MGC is very pivotal in development of all machine gunnery. There's a real development ambition, innovation and stuff that they come with.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think that's why my question that I was going to ask even before Scott came up with that great question. So hopefully, Scott, that answered your question. I think that was pretty good answer. Is the use of the machine gun barrages, because I particularly think of Vimy. Canal du Nord has one that I know because I have that map myself. Mapping it, and my question is, I just think those are cool. I mean, they're just cool maps because they're so detailed. But there was some debate at the time and after about the effectiveness of the machine gun barrages. And why I wanted to ask that in relation is because Vimy, in the popular Canadian, mind's eye of things, is seen as this, artillery advancement and kind of thing, which is not true, right? It was, none of that was new. But there was, fights that the artillery was doing all the work and the machine guns were just kind of there, not doing much. So you are one who knows about this probably the best. So I was wondering if you could speak about that a little bit. I know that's more First World War, but what that kind of does in terms of its tactical usefulness, maybe even the strategic usefulness. I don't know what level you want to speak to that on.
I don't know. I've got to say, it's a really interesting one because I get asked it quite a bit. And
I figured, yeah.
What is the effectiveness of the machine gun? Where are the POW accounts? Where are the where's all that stuff? And where's the evidence that supports it, really? And I'll tell you what, I don't think that there's sufficient evidence to prove it either way. And my logical reasoning for that is because if you're hit by a bullet on the battlefield, you don't have a clue whether that came from 2,700 yards away, because that's the maximum effective range in the Great War. Before we change some ammunition, some really technical stuff. But so 2,000, you don't know that. You don't know whether it came from that Vickers. It's a bit like the Red Baron argument. It's a 303 bullet. Did it come from a Vickers? Did it come from a Lewis? Did it come from a rifle? Who knows? What I can tell you is that there are some sort of reports of, we had a POW come through, so we asked him about our machine gun barrages, and they said they were incredibly effective and denied the whole area. But those are that's the second-hand account. You've got no first-hand accounts that I've come across. There may be, I don't know. But my logical reasoning for them there not being that as well is because they were mixed barrages most of the time.
Right.
So what are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about the stuff you can't hear that you think could just be shrapnel? Or are you going to talk about the stuff that's the really big bangs that are shaking you to your core?
Yeah.
So there's some reasoning why I don't think you have lots of reports of really effective machine gun barrages.
Right.
It's the same in the Second World War. But if in terms of cost effectiveness, I'll tell you what, why wouldn't you do it? 303 is relatively cheap.
It's cheap.
You can move 250 rounds of 303 for a single 4.5, 5.5, 8 shell. They're just £18 a shell. A box of ammunition is £22, 18. You can move it for the same effort. So why wouldn't you put 250 things that go zoom in the same place that you put one? And also, what else do they do if you don't? Saturation barrages are really important. Think about it as well from a tactical use, in that a machine gun barrage, you don't necessarily know is there until you're in it, because it's not blowing up the earth. It's not, there's no flashes, there's no bangs. It sounds just like small arms fire. So unless you're in it, you don't know it's there. So you're a brigade commander or whatever, and you go, right, battalion, over there, where you go. And they get there, and it's all being saturated by machine gun fire. They didn't know. Brigade commander still doesn't know, because it's just really interesting. You can deny those areas really effectively with machine gun fire, possibly more effectively than artillery fire, because you don't know where it's landing, and in most cases you don't know where it's come from.
And I mean, I think that's a good way of putting it. And you mentioned the whole Red Baron thing, which got me in trouble a few times, but the point overall is it doesn't matter in that sense as long as it's being saturated. I think that's what's important in terms of its tactical use. Why I was thinking about this, because a lot of my work runs through a lot of the same Canadian figures and characters, because they're both wars, right? McNaughton was against this, Andrew McNaughton, and his famous counter battery fire, and then the whole kerfuffle with First Canadian Army in the Second World War. Anyway, but it was he was against it, I think, in a lot of ways, because he was trying to protect his own service. It wasn't necessarily one was bad or better or whatever. I mean, the counter battery fire was very good, but that's not the same as an artillery barrage. There's a lot of political infighting and all of that. So that's why I was thinking about that in that sense. I think at the end of the day, as long as that area is being saturated, does it matter? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
You're going to get blown apart by a bunch of machine gun bullets or a shell. I mean, it's just, as long as you've got some fire on that spot, it's going to make a difference in that sense. And I think that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it was clearly effective enough, to keep the gun in service for so long. We're sat here looking back and going, well, was it effective? I don't know. Well, the gun stayed in service doing the same job for another years. So yeah, let's go with
It's got to have done something right.
We know the military keeps stuff for a little bit longer than they perhaps should sometimes, but it stayed in service for a reason. People liked it. People, even if it was just a morale effect, so be it. It's still
I mean, that's another thing that I've come across, particularly in the Second World War, is, and we'll probably talk maybe about this later when we're talking about the CANLOAN stuff, because that was another MG battalion, but is the morale of that thing. It was a booster. Like I've seen accounts where they're talking about, we've got the attachments from the machine gun battalions, and that noise and knowing that's there made them feel better because of what they knew that thing could do. And that's something I've come across a few times talking about it.
Yeah. So it's really important to remember that, machine gun battalions, although they're the centralization of all of the machine gun assets, they do get distributed and decentralized once you get on the ground. So it's a conversation that I have on Twitter every few months, probably, about why the British, the Commonwealth, the Empire, the Dominions, whatever, why they didn't have belt-fed machine guns in the company, the infantry companies.
Right.
Because they didn't need them. Really.
Yeah.
We're fighting a divisional level warfare, so divisional level assets for combined arms, but make sure that those assets are really mobile and really supported brilliantly. And and you don't need them in the company with a significant level of training, huge training burden with the Vickers, 170 hours in the Second World War of training for a machine gunner.
Because I just, like I said, reading that book, because I was looking at it last night, that sort of technical manual, and I'm like, they had to have trained forever for this, because like the way he's talking about it is, it's almost natural. It just makes sense, in a way. But again, I want to get to that later. Sorry, because we have another good question, kind of finishing up, I think, our fighting vehicle kind of thing. This I did not know about. That about why wasn't
there an air-cooled version? There was. So arguably there was. So Vickers clearly sold their weapons to everybody around the world. They were the arms beast. They were the Lockheed Martins, the General Dynamics, the BAEs combined. Thales, MBDA. They were that combined in the 20s and 30s. They were, I've got a great book up on the shelf up there. It's called The Bloody Traffic. And if you want to understand the interrelationships between governments, the press, banks and arms companies in the 20s and 30s, it's superb, because they ran the world. They go to, the prelude to this answer is that they would go to a country and they would say, that country over there has just bought some stuff from us. And that, country A that they went to, country B's just bought some stuff. Country A goes, oh, well, we don't really need it. We're not at war with them. Well, Vickers or AN other arms company goes to their mates in the newspapers and goes, go stir up some trouble with country A because country B just bought some stuff. We want country A to buy it. Well, country A can't afford it. Oh, well, go and have a word. Country A, go and have a word with this bank over here because they'll finance it for you. They happen to be the same shareholders. So it's all, it's like warmongering by design. So what they do is they produce lots and lots of different commercial variants of these guns. So that's where we get back to the question. And one of those commercial variants is the Class AT, and the Class AT is an air-cooled tank gun. It is not massively successful. So the reason being, because it heats up. So in a tank gun, you want, where are we? This is a 0.5 inch round for the Vickers, and this is the 303 round. It's really helpful having a messy desk because it means you've left something that might be useful. 303, 0.5 inch armor piercing or semi-armor piercing or whatever. They produce this gun, but because it's a bigger bullet, it's more propellant. It's got to pierce armor, so the barrel just gets hot really quickly. So when you've got that and you're developing it in the 20s and 30s, Just break up there a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're.
No, I'm back.
Yeah, we're back.
When the Beezer comes along, you've got better steel technology, so you can absorb the heat a little bit more.
Yeah,
and so you don't want it to heat up as quick. So also, if that is the case, and you're carrying it on a tank, you can carry water. So just stick a water jacket around it and be happy. True. Yeah, that's the sort of solution to the problem. Sadly,
another simple solution to a complicated
Vickers
program.
Variants that are air cooled, in that they have aircraft guns and everything as well. So, they do develop the air cooled technology, but it just doesn't suit tanks. Tanks are actually quite warm. The sort of latent temperature tanks are quite warm anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I don't think that is changed all that often. But yeah, I think that's a good reason. I mean, it makes sense.
Brad, you've just gone quiet on me. I know this is a live stream, so bear with me a minute.
Yeah.
There we go. Does that?
You back? Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you, sadly.
Oh.
Waiting.
I'm not muted or anything.
Sorry, everybody, if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Still nothing?
I'm going to come out of it a minute and just go straight back in.
Yeah, come back in. Sorry about that, everyone. A little bit of technical hiccup. Rich is in his shed there with his phone to show us the cool stuff. So a little technical hiccup is not unexpected with that. So we'll just give him a second. But yeah, these are great questions and thinking about this in different ways. But thanks, Greg Dominion. That was a good question about the tanks and everything. And it just seems like a simple solution to a problem, Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
there
you. Sorry about that.
I don't know. Sometimes that happens with the software. Just
somebody tried to ring me. Somebody tried to ring me and it cut out
that's probably
speaker.
why.
Sorry about that. That's
no worries.
The problem. Yeah,
that's okay. We're in a bit of a delay anyway, so it gives me a chance to talk for a second. But yeah, that's I mean, again, it's funny. I think there's always these themes, and the academic in me is always pulling them out, whether I try to or not. But it's a seemingly simple solution to a problem that's seemingly very difficult, right? We got that with why is the Vickers still in service, right? Because it works.
Yeah.
Why not using, why don't you use the water cooled version? It's just easier, It's just we can carry water in the tank. We can carry everything else. Why not some water? What's the difference?
You just see it there. So this there, that is the 0.5-inch Vickers. You can make it weigh 70 pounds because you're not carrying it. So be it. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. There's lots more heavier things that need to be carried than that. So whatever. Yeah, that's really cool. So I think that's good for the question. So and again, if you have more questions, everyone, we can go back to more technical details if you have more questions. But I did want to ask about the association because that'll lead to the CANLOAN. But like, how did that begin? I honestly don't know. So I'm interested to learn myself. And how does this machine gun association even start?
Yeah. So what it does is, back in 2011, so it's been in existence for just over 10 years now. My collection by that point was quite impressive, being sort of humble about it. The collection was probably 6 or 7 guns at that point, but they were all different. So the skeletonized gun was in there. A few different earlier guns were there as well. And we'd started to get some real interest from people to come and visit. Okay. And that made it seem like, well, wait a minute, why don't I share this collection with a few more people? So we got it put in a shed. It's a glamorous shed. It wasn't this one, but it was still a glamorous shed. And people would come and visit. That 0.5-inch actually is one of the reasons why it was put in a shed, because it used to live in a loft, and I used to hate getting that gun down from the loft. But we put it in there, and that sort of went, wow. This stuff started to be curated, to use a really grown-up term, together really nicely. And what happens if I lose interest? And what happens if the collection is threatened? Because, I've bought a house by that point. I've got a mortgage. I've got a job, quite a good job. But it's a job in government. It's always at threatening redundancy, things like that. I went, well, let me safeguard this collection so that I don't get tempted to break it up because I've broken up previous collections that I put together to fund this stuff. There was nobody out there doing the same. There's reenactment groups, living history groups, and there's collectors and stuff like that. But there's nobody out there doing the same kind of thing, just focused on the Vickers. So I decided to, basically set up this not-for-profit and gift my collection into that not-for-profit, so that that's now run by 4 directors, of which I'm just one of them. And there's 35 members. I think it's 35, might be nearer 40 now. That if it had to be broken up, all have to agree, why that takes place. And there's some legal stuff that means we really can't. It's great. It's one of those things that when collectors go, well, what will happen when I lose interest, or what will happen when I pass away, or if something happens to me, what will happen? Well, I think I've solved it. It takes a bit of bravery to go, you know what, this isn't a retirement fund. Guns should never be an investment. I think there's another video on YouTube at the moment about investing in guns. Certainly in the UK, guns should not be an investment. Even if you settle on deactivated stuff, it's not safe. The stock market increases better. But equally not safe. But your capital is at risk. As all the good adverts say. I decided, look, this isn't an investment. This needs to be safeguarded, and we need a solid foundation to build it. So I want to attract funding. I want to attract Patreons. I want to attract donations, stuff like that. And I can't do that if it's my collection, or I don't think it's right. You can do that, but I don't think it's right that any of those benefits come to me. We need, for what we do now, we have open days. The first one's next Saturday. So if you're in the UK, there's still a place left for that, I think. So we're in Wiltshire. We're sort of relatively central in the south. In the south. But it's one of those that we have open days, so we need insurance. We now have firing guns, as I said, for the skeletonized versions. Individuals in the UK don't get firing machine guns.
No.
Organisations and companies do,
Yeah.
if they have a good justification and good business reason for it.
Yeah.
We have good justification and good business reason. It's education and research. So we've set up on this really strong foundation that hopefully, to be honest, if I wasn't sat here talking to you, Brad, I'd probably be sat on the Charity Commission website doing our application to become a charity, to again take that professionalisation a step further, to really safeguard the collection. We haven't taken the step to become an accredited museum. There's a few reasons for that. One is that they're not really keen on you firing your exhibits. They don't like that. Yeah. It's conservation versus lots and lots of noise. So we think we're in the best place we can be organisationally if we become a charity, but not that big step to a museum. Right. This professional association has now existed for 10 years, and probably does lead us in a moment quite nicely into the book conversation. But we have the YouTube channel. I'm there on Twitter as me. We don't have a separate Twitter account because they just get confusing sometimes. I've tried that. I got confused. But we do have separate Facebook pages, Instagram pages. We do have the Patreon where we share loads of archive material. We share quite a lot on the website. Anyway, that's something that we started. I started that 20 years ago. We had a web presence back in 1997. Wow. Because I was a work experience teenager and somebody taught me to write code. So I started writing code about machine guns. And so we had a website back then, and that's obviously built to what we have today, which is we've currently got about 600 manuals online, over 1,200 pages on the website.
There's a lot there. I can't remember. I linked something down below. I linked your Twitter, maybe the website. I can't remember. Check that out.
It's all there. So
anyway, I was because I wanted to just jump in there because I was poking around and I'm like, this is impressive because I knew a little bit, like it was a smaller association and I've been following you. I don't even know for years now, I guess, technically. And I'm just like, I know there's firepower behind this, but not, as some of his other ones, right? It's not as big as some big museums. I was like, this is really impressive. I was getting a little overwhelmed a little bit with just how much there is in a good way. And I think that that's great because it just has a benefit for more than just learning about a technical part of a machine gun, which I think is,
absolutely. We're big. Well, I'm a big capability fan. So my day job is like defense management, defense capability, defense acquisition, marketing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I try and a big fan of one of the particular models that talks about the training, the equipment, the personnel, the infrastructure, the doctrine, the organization, the information, and the logistics, because the Vickers is just the equipment. But to understand how it's used, you've got to understand all of those other things. So it isn't just technical handbooks on the Vickers by any means.
No.
There's all of the training. There's camouflage pamphlets, because a machine gun battalion would have known that. They would have known how to do that. There's all the other small arms manuals on there as well. The reason I started scanning them though is really just because mending, fixing, getting guns working means you don't have to thumb through an original manual.
True.
So they're all on my phone. They're all on the internet. They're all there all the time. So if somebody asks me a random question, I've got quite a good memory about where stuff is, so I can start to pull it up and go, okay, I don't need to go into the boxes full of 1,000 manuals, thumb through everything, and try and find it. So they're safeguarded. That's not just about the collection, the guns, but the manuals, the material, the paperwork, the archive stuff is all safeguarded as well.
And I think that's great. It's a way of preservation in and of itself. Definitely.
So we do that. We've got all that going. We do open days, as I said. We started to do some school visits. So working with a company over here called Zeitgeist Tours. They do a UK trench experience thing. And we're going along to support them and actually having some students work as the number 2 on a Vickers. So we're really pushing some of the boundaries about how do we engage, year 9s, what's that, 14-year-old, 15-year-olds in history. Well, they're going to be like closer than you can, as close as you can legally get to a machine gun firing.
That's right there. I mean,
so we're doing that. We've got some events and stuff working with museums this year for the 100th anniversary of the disbandment of the Machine Gun Corps.
I've seen that on Twitter.
So we're sharing a postcard every day, which is amazing.
I think that's right. Just again, I think that's really cool because again, that's how. One thing I've learned with all this digital, online, everything is if you have an overall theme, but it's small chunks, you'll learn a ton because you're seeing it all the time and it starts to sink in, right? I think that's
and there's so much stuff from those postcards. So much stuff.
I know, it's crazy. I was surprised.
Like uniform detail. I'm just scanning in at the sort of next batch at the moment, and if anybody wants to study the wedding dresses of the First World War, because there's so many of people getting married in these postcards.
I know.
They'll be able to. So it's great.
It's crazy, like the things you can learn.
But then, key part of what we started in the last 2 years is publishing. So this takes us into. So I'm
going to stop you there because I do have some questions. I don't want to forget them because that's okay. But let's try to keep them quick. I think they're pretty quick. So we'll do one more technical chunk and then we'll get to the book and CANLOAN. So this is from Sheldrake again. The quick change barrels. I guess this might be a quick answer. Is that kind of what ended water-cooled MGs? Maybe a little.
A bit back to the technical stuff. No, not really.
Okay.
Quick change barrels absolutely key, but really we no longer needed sustained fire. So quick change barrels, great. Don't make much difference. My favorite calculation. Happy to share it again on Twitter or bring up the conversation. If you're firing 10,000 rounds on a task, then you only need to change a Vickers barrel once. If you're firing 10,000 rounds on a task with a MG42, you need to change that barrel 79 times. So, so quick depends what you're doing. And if you want sustained fire, quick change barrel doesn't matter.
Makes sense. That makes perfect sense now when you explain it. This is an interesting one, and I have no idea about the connection. Is there a connection between the Browning machine gun, the water-cooled Browning, and the Vickers at all?
No technical connection whatsoever. Maxim patented his stuff. That becomes the Vickers. Browning basically developed something really different inside. And the only similarity in the mechanical function of those is the water cooling, the fact that it uses water in a jacket, which is the same as the Ravelli, same as the as the Maxims as they're developed. So that wasn't patented. Everything else is different. We're saying that the Americans did produce their own Vickers as well, so they did serve alongside the Browning for a little bit.
Okay,
so, yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, I figured that. I know more about the Browning than I do. It's not good as a Canadian historian, but I know more about the Browning than I do the Vickers. But I guess that's because I'm right next door to the big guys. Love my American followers, by the way. And this is an interesting question. Going back, we were talking about the museum and the regulations around firearms and machine guns specifically. Maybe you know about this, but could Brits store their firing MGs in France? Because Sheldrake, who's well connected in all these communities, said he heard of that back in the 90s.
I don't know, actually. I don't know the French regs. I mean, it's a Class A weapon under the European Firearms Directive. Quite complicated to store anywhere. It's a military weapon as well, so it's not like the semi-autos. So it's probably and the French government doesn't like Brits owning too much if they're not resident in France anyway. So I don't even know. You can probably fire them over there. Certainly semi-auto you can go across. I think there's some changes at the moment in French regs because we're getting some noise that there might be lots of full auto stuff becoming available. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, to see whether it could. But at the end of the day, if you want to, irrespective of where you can store them or what you can do, you can come and see them here. It's fine. You can't fire. That's one of the things. You can't fire them just because of the way the regulations are, sadly. But we can give you as close a look as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's sorry, just the comments. Yeah, we know that, Scott.
Yes, but Scott, so this gets really defensive. But a Vickers in the US will cost you $40,000. It costs you $2,000 in the UK.
But you can't fire
it. No, I mean that's a firing. Supply and demand.
I'm just saying. I grew up within 45 minutes of the U.S. border, so I saw lots of stuff that you do not see in Canada that is available for purchase in the United States. And it was interesting. I'll say that much. On AK-47 designed for hunting, and I went, what? Anyway, that's besides the point, but I think that's just quite funny. Anyway, so let's get back to kind of what started this whole process, is the book and CANLOAN and all of that. So I wonder if you can explain how, I know now because I was reading part of it, but how that all started.
Yeah, so back when I was that 14-year-old, I think I was by the time I got in touch with Rex Fendick. So Rex was a CANLOAN officer, and he served in Saint John Fusiliers, and he's from New Brunswick, from Saint John. He basically joined up, became an officer, and one of the schemes at the time was that the Canadian Army had a surplus of young subalterns, lieutenants and second lieutenants.
And sorry, just jumping, a big surplus. I mean, it's not like this is like 100 extra guys. Like, it was a lot. Yeah.
And the British did not, quite simply. We did not have a surplus of junior officers. And, amongst, how do we train senior NCOs, junior NCOs? How do we pick people, put them through officer cadet training units, all those things? This CANLOAN scheme comes about. And Rex was one of these officers that came across to the UK, initially to join the King's Own Scotch Borderers, which was affiliated to Saint John Fusiliers. He sat there initially in Sussex, waiting to go across to Normandy as a reinforcement officer with 6 KOSB. He then goes across with number 34 reinforcement holding unit, and they say, well, we need some machine gun officers. And he said, well, St. John's Fusiliers, they were a machine gun unit. I know how to use the Vickers machine gun. I even did it in college. So, his affection, and it is a true affection, and you'll see, you've seen that in the book.
Oh, it comes through very clearly.
He loves the Vickers.
Oh, yeah.
He goes in, and he becomes an officer in the 2nd Battalion of Middlesex Regiment, which is the machine gun battalion to the 3rd Division. And Rex serves there until the end of the war, stays for a little bit in the Army of Occupation, or BLR, British Army of the Rhine, transfers across to 1st 7th Middlesex in 51st Highland, but eventually comes back to Canada and serves in the Canadian Army until the 1970s. Royal Canadian Electrical Mechanical Engineers. You can see sort of some of that mechanical knowledge, well, not just mechanical knowledge, how he translates that mechanical knowledge. You can tell that he's taught a lot of people very simply.
Well, you mentioned that because it's probably not so well known, particularly today. You mentioned the university training program for officers. Doesn't exist anymore in Canada, but that was big at the time. And he talks about that in the book, talking about, well, he was using the Lewis, which I think is funny because that's Canada to a T. There's just Lewis guns everywhere. Apparently everyone's got one by the way it sounds at that time period. But anyway, so yeah, I think it's an interesting part of that, the war that just there's no contemporary connection in Canada to anymore. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so he has this affection for the Vickers that then really his son Reg basically talks him into writing down his memoirs in the mid-80s, and he starts this memoir and just it's loose fold sort of printed, sends it to a few people, they have a few read. It's just about his service, it's not about the Vickers at that point. And then Dolph Goldsmith, he sends a copy to Dolph Goldsmith, who certainly US interested people will know Dolph's books on the Brownings and stuff. But then he did the book, Grand Old Lady of No Man's Land in 1994. He'd done The Devil's Paintbrush on the Maxim. And the Grand Old Lady of No Man's Land is about the Vickers. I got given that for the first Christmas after I'd got a Vickers. So 25 years later, so last year, I was really happy to be able to say, well, now I've co-authored the second edition to that with Dolph, which is like a huge bookend to my 25 years of collecting. And so, so that's published. That was published. Rex got a copy. Rex wrote loads of stuff to Dolph, which is great. So he basically wrote this critique of, because there wasn't much about the British use of the Vickers in the Second World War. Dolph writes a lot about the US use, Australian use, New Zealand, because he writes to the sources he has available. And he doesn't have much about the British use in the Second World War. So Rex writes this critique to Dolph. So they get in touch. Dolph says, you need to write this stuff down. Because he sent him a copy of his memoir. You need to build an appendix. So he does. So he produces this amazing appendix. What's happened alongside that is I've written to Dolph as like a 13-year-old and going, wow, I've just got your book. I'm interested in the Vickers. What can you tell me? And Dolph gives me 2 addresses to chase up. One, a collector here in the UK, one of Rex. And I start to correspond with Rex on email. When you can think this is 96, 97, email isn't that widespread. So the fact that, I'm, 13 and have got email, and Rex is, it is 70s at that point, 60s or 70s, and has got email over in Canada, we start to correspond quite a lot. And by 2002, Rex has rewritten the memoir and published it sort of bound there. So that is Rex's 2002 version. And in it is the appendix on the Vickers. And sends me a copy, and I read it cover to cover, just like I'd done with Grand Old Lady of No Man's Land, and become fascinated by it. It was sadly after my grandfather had passed away, so he didn't get to read it, because I would have loved to have been able to talk to him about what was different in Italy for him. What were those differences? What was different in the Cheshire Regiment to the Middlesex? Things like that. But it now, there are no platoon commander accounts or there are very few platoon commander accounts, full stop. In the Second World War, because we've got to remember, Rex doesn't get promoted. He's a CANLOAN officer. So he could have been promoted, but basically his commanding officer didn't think he could. So the system allowed it. Nobody told anybody that these Canadians can be promoted.
This Canadian shows up one day. What do we do with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty much,
If you look at that list of CANLOANs, you'll see there's not many majors. There's quite a few subalterns. There's eventually a few captains.
Well, they made them take. I think it's funny you mentioned that because, the confusion around CANLOAN now, then confusing. I mean, he just jumps the way he describes it, right? You're talking he's with the original battalion he's with, and just makes it sound like he just like, yeah, okay, I'll be a machine gun officer now.
Yeah,
it's just so haphazard. But I mean, well, sorry, going back to what I was saying, the Canadian government made them take captains too, which I think is
so yeah, you must. Thing. We've got loads. Just take them.
Take some, damn it! Like that's such a Canadian thing, being like, okay, we'll help you, but we have this tiny little issue. Just do it, okay? That's a very Canadian thing to do in the war. Yeah,
it's an amazing scheme. It's absolutely an amazing scheme.
Yeah.
I will, alongside the book launch and stuff, we'll put some more material out there.
Oh, that's great.
But but what we'll put out there is I've got the Army Council instruction that sets out all the regs for CANLOAN. So that's the British Army Council instruction. So it's really interesting to look at. But coming back to the book, so 2002, I get this copy, reading it backwards, forwards. It's really limited public. I don't know how many recs. I could ask Reg actually. I don't know how many recs had published, but what happens is it pretty much falls off the radar, and there's not that many platoon commander accounts in general. So Sydney Jarry 18 platoon is probably the famous one, and that's an infantry battalion. Great, but there's a couple of armored ones as well, troop commander. But this is the only machine gun one. There's a Lieutenant Colonel memoir, 2nd Manchester's in the Far East, which is great. But then you're into the regimental histories and stuff like that. So we published the 33rd Battalion Machine Gun Corps history last year, and we did really well with that. We're really pleased. The reception was amazing. We've got a few copies left, but not many. So we decided, well, look, let's look for other material to publish. And CANLOAN's always been the forethought of my mind that other people need to read this stuff, because it's a great machine gun account. It's a great platoon command. The leadership elements that are within there are brilliant. The way he manages his men. He's in a Cockney platoon. So Middlesex men. And he's sort of saying that most of them are Cockneys from central London, and he's a Canadian. Goes in and just brings them together beautifully. There's a couple of accounts in there that he talks of really nicely. The one that always springs to mind for me is, and you'll like it because it involves carriers. Universal carriers, most people call them brain gun carriers. Those people are wrong. There was a brain gun carrier, but it goes out of service in 1941. And so the universal carrier that has the Vickers was principally used for the Vickers machine gun, loads of other tasks, but in the machine gun battalion they all had, so it's fully mechanized. And a machine gun platoon was made up of 4 gun carriers and 1 platoon commander's carrier and a platoon sergeant's carrier. So this book is full of carrier information as well. Great machine gun stuff, great leadership, loads of technical carrier information as well. And in it talks about, so the way the carriers worked was they would steam forward, set up the guns, literally throw everything off, set up the guns, and then they would go back behind the hedge line or whatever, so they're out of the way. And then when they finish firing, they steam forward again, pick up the guns and go back and get out of the way. And then the mortars land and everything, and it all goes horribly wrong. So, make yourself unpopular near infantry. This account that Rex has is like his first proper machine gun shoot. So he wants to do everything by the book. And his officer commanding, a company major, Pat Weston, is watching as well. And so he said, he gets there and he does all this stuff, and there's no radios or anything, so it's all flags. Because that's quite funny. So it's all flags, and he stands on top of his carrier to flag for the other carriers to come forward because they finish firing, and he does all the sort of signals and shouts the orders that he needs to do. And he turns and looks to his men, and they're all sat on their carriers going, "What the hell are you still doing good there? We need to move." And so he looks at Pat Weston like, "Oh, what do I do?" They're just like heads down and steam off. They've just thrown the guns on the carriers because they know what's coming. They've been in Normandy 2 weeks. They know what's coming. And so it's this great. So he says that just breaks the tension. Really, he then learns how to be a combat platoon commander. one of the other pieces that we put in the book this time that wasn't in the original, so we've added new material,
which I think is great. Another observation from my professional trained historian mind is the footnotes that have been added. I think are awesome, because there's just some things that he forgot. Like, he literally says that in the book. He's like, "Oh, I wish I remembered, so and so," or "I want to leave with so and so. I forget his name. I wish I knew."
Yeah.
Anyway, but there's parts that have been added now that you keep the story that was told originally, but are now adding more. And I think that's a great way to do it. Sorry, that's just an observation from me. That's all.
We did that for the 33rd Battalion book, and that was written in 1919. We've done that for this book because it needed doing.
That's great.
There's so much more material out there. But one of the great things with this book is, so I reached out to Reg Fendick, who is Rex's son, and Reg, I'd noted. So I'd been in touch with Reg around when Rex passed away a few years ago, and I'd noticed Reg had liked our page on Facebook, and I was like, "Well, okay, I need to get hold of him because I want to talk to him about his dad's book." And eventually found an old email and sent a message to Reg to say, "Look, you might remember me. This is me. Blah blah blah. What do you think of the idea of republishing your dad's book?" And he said, "I'll scan everything for you. I'll find it all. I'll send it over." So he has rescanned all the photos. He's rescanned the maps. He has added new information. So we didn't know. So one of the things I asked you, Brad, wasn't it, what happened to the CANLOAN Association? And
I don't know. Sorry, we talked about this, but I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find anyone. Maybe
the association's website sort of disappeared. Turns out that they wound it up in about 2007. Rex was there. Reg was there. So I'm able to add that as a footnote into the book to cap it all off nicely. So Reg was able to provide all this extra information. One of the extra, coming back to some of the anecdote stuff about serving with this Cockney platoon, one of the questions, so Rex kept everything. You read the book and you'll realise Rex was a proper hoarder and a thief. There's not big bones about this. If he saw something, he took it home with him.
He did.
He was a collector. Let's not say he was a collector.
Sorry, another one of the favorite ones from that is he sent everything to his dad. He's just like, whatever. He just put it in the mail. I'm done with it in the mail.
Well, worse than that, he sent it to his aunties first in Cambridge, and then they forwarded it to his dad in Canada. So amazing. But one of the things that he'd kept is the original recruitment brochure for CANLOANs.
Yes, he did.
So what they were given in Canada. And Rex put the front cover of that in his original book, but we've reprinted everything. We put all the pages in there because there's some Q&A, frequently asked questions. One of those frequently asked questions is, what if I'm sent to a Highland or Northumberland battalion and they don't understand me? It's just and basically the answer underneath it, they all speak English. It'll be fine. You may have to slow your accent down or something like that. I can't remember what it exactly was, but it was just it's just one of those amazing things that they thought of everything. And it brings that service to life. It's great. It's a funny book. Actually, in a few places, there's some great humor in it. There's some great affection in it as well.
Yes.
The genuine love that exists between great friendship, love, affection between Rex and his mate Mac. Another CANLOAN officer that goes from Saint John Fusiliers all the way through to the end of the war with him. And then there's a photo of them both at the CANLOAN Memorial as well, at the unveiling of it. And it's this great relationship that's like, well, then I went on leave with Mac and we did this. So it's a lovely, account of that sort of bond that gets built between soldiers, two Canadian soldiers serving in the same British battalion. And you can start to, it's not a story of all CANLOAN officers. Code Word CANLOAN by Will Smith does that. But at the same time, that doesn't do it with the same level of detail and affection. We do have a copy of that, thankfully. And Rex talks about providing information for that as well. But this memoir is so detailed on so many levels. He's so detailed about this is like 1985, so 40 years after his, and we've got to, you're a historian, you've got to take some of this stuff with a pinch of salt.
Yep.
But when you compare it to other accounts, you can start to correct the tiny errors. And I don't think there's anything then left in this memoir that needs reading through. You don't sort of bypass it. So all the level of detail that he goes into is typical of the period. So, he refers to tanks as tigers. Look at this tiger over here. And it's his photo, because he takes a camera with him everywhere, which is great. These are largely unpublished photos elsewhere. Some appear in the Middlesex Regiment history. Some appear in the second Battalion history, because Rex supplies them. He's the one with the camera. There's super stuff in there that you won't find anywhere else. Like I say, he says, look at this tiger, and it's a panther. And how do we know it's a panther? Because it's a panther. It's like, I'm not a tank buff, but I know that.
You know the difference.
Yeah. So that's all in there. Just how a platoon lived together as well. It's great. Machine gun platoons are really interesting because they're fully mechanized, so they can carry all their own stuff. They have their own cook. They have their own proper.
That was surprising to me, to be honest.
Yeah. If there's living history units out there that ever go, oh well, should we do machine guns? Well, if you've got carriers, do machine guns, because you can take your own cook. Nobody has to brew up on their own. They are very self-sustaining, and that sort of starts to tell you, well, wait a minute, why are they like that? It's because they get detached down to battalion level when they're like that, because the battalion that's hosting them isn't going to look after them. He talks about that they sort of stay alongside Royal Ulster Rifles for a bit, KOSB, 1st Battalion, KOSB, and 3rd Div. They stay alongside particular battalions for quite a while. He's normally with 9 Brigade. So they get to know the other officers, which is great. But it's really interesting to see how they lived when they were working like that as well, because they had to live pretty independently. Nobody was caring for them other than themselves.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned that, because, again, my Canadian experience, I've seen it with the Ottawa unit, because I live in Ottawa now. So I always tend to get excited by the units that I have a sort of local connection to. Or
Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa.
Yeah, the Cameron Highlanders one. I mean, they're at Carpiquet, which is a big one. They got no mentions. Poor guys, they aren't mentioned at all.
No,
they're providing a hugely important part of that attack. Anyway, but then I was doing some stuff with Project 44 for their social media, and so I was doing stuff in Ortona. And the Saskatoon Light Infantry never gets mentioned ever, and they're there all the time.
I know.
No mentions at all.
This is one of the frustrations of machine gun units, is because they're in bits, they don't fight as a single unit.
Yeah.
So you might follow, another, battalion or regiment in their regimental history, and they might mention the machine guns. The divisional histories normally talk about the teeth arms alone, forgetting that there's a 10th Infantry Battalion. It hardly ever gets mentioned. Perhaps the cap badge is put in the back. So Saskatoon Light Infantry. I was really honoured. Again, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, a guy called Lieutenant Colonel Larry Wong from the South Saskatchewan Regiment got in touch with me and sent me a copy of the Saskatoon Light Infantry regimental history.
Oh,
so scanned it all in, sent it back. So I've got a copy of that. Love that. It's amazing that they're not written about, because they were so photographed. They are one of the most photographed units in Italy.
That's how I know that, because that's what I was doing, right? Because I think some of them are out now, because I did Ortona for January, or they'll be coming. Anyway, so I was just doing some digging, because that's what I like to do. And I was like, it just keeps coming up. I'm like, Saskatoon Light Infantry, there's mortars, there's the heavy machine gun unit.
20 mil as well. So the support group piece.
Yes,
so
it's a support. It's like a support unit. So then I went down the rabbit hole, as historians do, and it's just like, where are they? They're here. They're everywhere. They're some of the most iconic photos that get used for Ortona or after all the time. No mention.
It's frustrating.
Here's a Canadian soldier, and I'm like, we're missing a huge chunk here.
One of those things, isn't it? It's so I talk about the publishing, and I talk about this book and this book. So just to sort of really quickly say, this is probably about 6 weeks away from pre-order. We're putting together the the last drafts at the moment, and then we'll
Right.
get in touch with the printers, and we'll get it available for pre-order first, because we need to know how many we're going to order.
Yes.
We will then move on to the next project. So this isn't like, if we only order 100 and they sell out, we'll get another lot done. We just genuinely, we don't have time for that. We are on to such a series of projects now that we want to know people's interest and to help fund that. We're not for profit. We can't put out the $3 or $4 grand that we need to do to buy 300 copies. So we need to open up pre-orders with order, and we turned that around quite quickly for 33rd Battalion. A bit slower than we'd have wanted, but we'll probably turn it around in a month. So we'll open up pre-orders in 6 weeks or so, turn it, then get some books to people within another 4 to 6 weeks. But one of the things the reason I sort of whizzed through that really is because I want to talk about, once we've done this, I've got a Machine Gun Corps Victoria Cross diary to publish by April, because that's the only anniversary is. I then hopefully will finish off one of the parts of the Machine Gun Corps history. So it's a 5-part series. I'd really like to get that done for the anniversary in July. Then I've got a couple of other things to do. But one of the books that I'd really like to do, and it's a proper book. It's not a reprint. It's not somebody else doing it and I pull stuff together, which is what a lot of this is. But the one I want to write myself is, the history of machine gunners, Vickers machine gunners, principally in the Second World War.
Right, okay,
so, taking all of those people from, the Australians have got brilliant battalion histories. Brilliant machine gun battalion. Everyone's got one, and there's quite a few individual accounts as well. The British only have their regimental histories, so we can tease stuff out of that. And what I want to do is pull together all of those voices, add in some other unpublished material, add in some war diary stuff and all that, and write a book that takes a narrative approach to how machine gunners served around the world, and look at these different conflicts and tactics through their eyes. From the Canadian perspective, try and get a different perspective from everyone that used the Vickers. And I do mean everyone. I don't, so if they were a tank regiment in North Africa that had the 0.5 inch on their light tanks, great. I want to try and incorporate something that represents them and represents that use, because it's so often overlooked. That's probably a 2024, 2025 project, to be honest, but it's there. And hopefully, Brad, that will encapsulate some of the Saskatoon Light Infantry stuff that you've been missing. Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa, Princess Louise Fusiliers in 6th Armoured, 6th Div. All of these different organisations, just get overlooked, really, and people don't understand how they operated. It's just fascinating.
I seen that. That sounds amazing. I'm already excited. So get right in that, because I want to read it. Because I just wanted to, and someone, I think it's Philip might laugh at this, but or somebody else, I can't remember who. Anyway, somehow I always make it connect to Hong Kong, because that's what I do. Is the Middlesex, right? That's how I came to learn this, because the 1st Battalion is wiped out in 41. But that's funny, because you keep mentioning the regimental history, because I went to London years ago now and did research with it. So it was interesting to see how these different parts connect and everything.
So I just pulled this book out because this is Bridge with Three Men by Tony Hewitt, who was in the Middlesex in Hong Kong and gets captured, obviously, they pretty much all do, but escapes and gets to China. And he ends up serving alongside Rex Fendick in the 2nd Battalion Middlesex as the company commander in 1945. So this book gets mentioned in Rex's account. So I thought, I need to find it. I need to read that, because we all do, don't we? There's an excuse. We need to buy the book. So there is a Hong Kong link to the CanLOAN book. There we go.
There we go. There's always a connection, and I don't even have to do this one. I love it. I have heard of the book. I forgot, because again, sorry, bit of a side thing, but the Hong Kong story is just so connected in so many ways. Like you mentioned, there are so many officers and people who would just escape and make their way back to England, or to Britain. And it's just, I'm just like, geographically alone, I'm just mind boggled that happened. And then just back into service, and then how these are connected. And then you throw the machine gun elements in here. It's just, these are amazing stories. Well, we've already got we're drumming up some interest for the book already. So that is amazing.
That's super.
in Belgium, I don't know if you send across.
Yeah, we'll ship to anywhere that Royal Mail will send it. So, we ended up for the Pride of the MG's book, which does have lots of good Hong Kong content in it. Actually,
I bet it does.
Hong Kong police as well using the Vickers
Yes.
for
Yeah,
crowd
they did.
control.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is a monster. This is 3.5 kilos. We ended up doing all the other than North America distribution. So it's 1,000 pages, and Chipotle sort of said, "Will you ship everywhere else for us?" And well, let's have a look. So if people are prepared to pay the postage, we'll post anywhere. And so far we've sent a fair few. I think we've sent about 100 of these out. In our little post office, we have to thank them every time we take them in.
Those poor people.
But we've we send those out, and we've had none go missing. We've had a couple returned, but considering COVID and reasons and all those other things, we've had none go missing. So we've got a really good hit rate, touch wood. Yeah. Even though they're books about machine guns, customs still let them go through, which is good.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a whole other thing. But anyway, yeah, so that's great. So thanks for that insight. I really, really appreciate it. And again, I haven't dug into the book as much as I'd like, because as I'm sure you can imagine, I've got so many things on the go.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I do want to give proper time to it, because it's an amazing story. I mean, just like you said, the humor, the insights, the way he writes, to me, this should be a classic book.
It's a readable account, isn't it? I mean, and I've spoke to colleagues across sort of military history world about it, and we're going to try and make sure that there's wider access to it. We're going to those that know the 33rd Battalion history, that we sold for £25. An original will cost you somewhere between £200 and £400 now. A CANLOAN Officer is available. Secondhand versions. There is an ebook version that's floating around from a few years ago. We've rescanned all the maps and stuff like that. So not to say ours is better, but ours is better. We've done quite a lot of work with it, and worked with Reg on adding that additional content as well. But we're still going to pitch it out for probably between 27, 28 quid, something like that. So that's not much money from a book. We're hoping that it's an easy decision to make for people to go, I'll just buy it. If we can keep it below that £30 mark, we think that's where people go, I'll buy it. I don't need to think, I'll read it, and they'll learn about machine gunnery in the Second World War, which is the important thing. Yeah,
but I mean, I just having the version you sent me, that's not the final version. I'm like, people need to get this. I mean, just even if, again, for not everyone's always interested in the technical things, and that's perfectly fine. But from like this perspective of this book, it's got that, but also, and this might be a bit of a reach or upset some people, but there's hardly any like accounts at this level in Canadian generally as well, right? Like you were mentioning, that doesn't exist. We have Farley Mowat, who wrote fiction, nonfiction about his experiences. I think if this was better known, it would be up there. That might be a bit of a reach. I don't know, but I believe that because I've read Mowat's stuff, and this is the level of detail, the like you said, the affection he has for the men, that he has friends with the men that he's in command of, the ones who died. I mean, it's and the way he writes and the humor, and it's an amazing book. And again, I don't have any connection to you guys with this, so I'm saying this all on my own. Sorry, everyone. Rich did not make me say any of this. I didn't have to promise to push to get him on. I think it's great, and I do want to get more into this one, because I just think I was just hooked by his like intros. And one thing I did want to mention, I think is funny, and it speaks to the book and to his personality, is there's a picture of his son with the Vickers he made for him.
So
amazing sound. That's amazing.
So Reg sent me that, like, I don't know, probably. So I sent you that a fair few days ago now, but Reg sent me that just a day or two before, and because I'd said, can you write a forward? And if there's any particular really nice photos of you and your dad together, can you send those in and I'll include them? So one of the great things is Rex managed to get across to two of the commemorative shoots that happened in the UK.
Right. Yes,
there was one in 1995 to commemorate the formation of the Machine Gun Corps, And there was one in 2002 to commemorate the disbandment, the 80th anniversary of both.
Yeah.
We are trying to do a 100th anniversary centenary shoot at the moment, but Rex managed to. He was obviously on the grapevine. If he'd heard there was a Vickers machine gun being fired, a big shoot somewhere, he got to it. So he managed to get to that. Reg sent those across, and then he just added that extra photo of saying, "Here's a photo of me with this Vickers that my dad made that works on a doorbell that's taken the ringer off, so it makes a clack, clack, clack sound when you press the thumb piece." So what? That blows my mind.
I know.
And amazingly, Reg still has it.
What?
So that it's just like, this is great. So you know, Reg has been super in this, and
it's amazing.
You know, it's one of those things that you sort of go, well, Reg, you're just like your dad. You've hoarded this stuff over the years. Thank you.
In a good way. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much for doing it. We've been able to add in, so there's a slightly sad tale to some of that hoarding, in that some of the photos that we have included were stuff that his dad had put to one side because he couldn't fit them into the book when he published it in 2002. His dad typeset the book and everything himself,
which is also amazing.
Yeah. So he said he just got into working in it, so that's all in the forward. So he put these to one side thinking he might put them in a later edition, and sadly by the time he got to think of it, he'd gone blind. So he was unable to give captions to the photos or anything. And thankfully, working with Reg, we've been able to put those together and to say, well, look, this looks like this. And once you start to look at it in around, we've been able to include those additional photos. So, I haven't included that in the text actually or in the introduction. So, it's one of those just quite emotional elements of putting this together. Having spoken to Rex on the phone, when I was a teenager, we'd ring each other from the UK to Canada, which was a great experience in itself. So, it's really nice to be in touch with him. I've still got all my emails. I don't even have that email address anymore, but I printed everything off. So I've still got all my emails with him as well, where I was asking really boring questions. He must have thought they were so boring. But his responses were written in the same way that this book is written.
Yeah, I bet.
So, it's brilliant. It's such a readable account. I recommend it just because I enjoy reading it.
So did I. So I was like, because I just ran out of time because I was trying to get a bunch of stuff done yesterday. And I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go to the technical part because you hooked, I think it was you or Reg, I can't remember. One part of it I can't remember is like the technical manual, if you want to call it, that's been sort of spruced up. I'm like, all right, I'm hooked. I'm going there. So I started reading it and I'm like, you are not lying.
It's brilliant. You can understand all of the clever stuff about machine gunnery very easily. Whether you'd apply it, I don't know. I don't know if I trust you to stand under the cone of fire yet, Brad. But at least you've read it. And the fact that Reg recalled that, 50 odd years on, is just it's very similar to my grandfather's experience of sitting down behind the gun and taking the gun apart. It's latent knowledge that you didn't realize you still remembered, but
it just really comes through for sure.
Yeah, I'm scared of what I'll remember in 50 years' time sometimes.
Yeah, that's me week to week. Anyway, maybe too much American football in my day, but anyway, that's besides the point. So I wanted to end with a video I just put together real quick of the CANLOAN Memorial, which is in Ottawa, which I visit often, not recently because of the weather. We got dumped on, but because it's very close to the Hong Kong Memorial, actually. I tend to visit both. There's and this will make Sheldrake happy. The Royal Artillery Regiment Memorial is there. There's one for the Spanish Civil War veterans in the nearby area, and then there's one for flyers who were killed in North America or the Americas area. I can't remember what the extent actually is. These are all within, I don't know, a 30-second walk of each other in Ottawa. But they're off the beaten path, which is why most people don't know about it.
So I definitely regret not finding that out before I stayed near Bywood Market, which is probably, 500 meters south of that?
It's to the west, but it's on the other side of the falls, which no one knows about. Even that spot is amazing, and no one goes there. They should. But anyway, so it's there, so I can play that, so we can get a look. And I do want to say one thing is because you and me were talking about the association and just the general misunderstandings or lack of complete knowledge on CANLOAN. Unfortunately, the memorial, I think, in its state reflects that in a negative way, which is unfortunate. But it is, that is what it is. And I'm just one person. I can't do much. But I've been thinking about this one a lot, and the state that it is. But we'll see it, and I'll play it for everyone to see. And it is linked below as well if you want to look at it later, if this doesn't work for whatever reason. But I'll just let this play. It's only about a minute and a bit. Okay, so that was the video. So that's still there.
Yeah, still here.
Yeah, I think my internet's now being annoying. Anyway, well, we're almost finished, so that's good. But anyway, sorry, I was there on a Sunday morning and someone's banging away on some scaffolding or something.
wow.
I was like, "That's a good thing." Anyway, that's that sound you hear in the background. I didn't want to remove it because I like the background noises around there because it is quite peaceful when someone's not banging on metal. It's a nice little spot. But yeah, the memorial I don't think has been updated or upkept in any way since it was dedicated, unfortunately.
Okay,
but, it's not the only one in the city like that.
Maybe we can. I don't even know who would have the responsibility for that, Brad, in Canada. Yeah, I'd know
the only thing I can,
over here.
Probably then. Well, we have a bit of local politics for it, but it's a National Capital Commission is in charge of the Ottawa region and all these things. So I don't know if it's them. I don't know. I want to do some digging on that when I get a second.
Yeah, let's do that. That'd be good.
To see who it is. I might I'll reach out to Veterans Affairs. I know some people there, so maybe they'll know. Or it might be.
I don't know if you've noticed, but on the chat, Reg has been watching. So Reg Fendick has been watching.
Yeah, I was just about to say. Yeah, thanks for watching, Reg. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I can show his comment here. Really appreciate you coming out and watching. It's great. Thanks for doing everything you did, Reg. I mean, it's amazing that you kept this, shared all this, allow us into the family story and everything. I really, really appreciate that. And I love that photo of you in the book. It's a machine. And you still have it. That is amazing. That is, I think I might need to see that at some point. That's awesome. That's great. It might be a little easier for me to see that in Canada than to come to visit Rich with all his real ones there. But yeah, so that's it. There's everything's linked below. Your Twitter's linked, and that will get you a link to anyone who wants to check everything out. You've got all your links there. Again, I can't remember what I linked. I think I might have put the website up. So anyway, check that out, everyone. There's lots of info there, so everyone check that out. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap up, and then I'll come back and we'll say goodbye. All right, Rich?
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll come back before we sign off. So thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate it. Thanks again to Rich coming on. I really appreciate sharing all his great knowledge in all these areas and letting us chat on this. Well, for me, this morning, it was great to hear all this. Thanks again for watching. If you like what I do, on here. Please subscribe. Uh, and like the video and comment after as well. And comments section below really helps the video see more people. That's on live stream. We seem to have some issues here, so I'll sign off. Thanks again for watching. Oh, he's back. He's moving. I see him moving. There we go. All right. Thanks, Rich, for coming on. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's great to be able to share this stuff.
Fun on the show. Going on with the video loadout, and I'll see everybody next time. So have a good day, everybody.